Good afternoon and welcome to day 2 of the University of Kansas School of Education and the KU Global Education Academy's Educator Conference in this virtual arena. We are really grateful that you're taking the time to join us this afternoon for day 2. My name is Joe Novak and I am blessed to be part of the KU School of Education, but I've also served in a number of positions in public education for over 35 years prior to coming to KU. I don't know about you, but I was thrilled to have been part of day 1 and the presentations on Tuesday. Marty Elford, Amber Rowland, Susie Myers, 6th grade teacher Josh Stock, superintendents Anthony Lewis and Carrie Wozniak presented both practical, relevant ideas and strategies for virtual and blended learning. I wanted to share a couple of posts with you to start off today, so allow me to see if I can do that. I don't believe I can right now. There we go. It's nice to be tech savvy. I saw a couple of posts on Facebook and Twitter, and these are coming from educators. So I'm going to give you just a second to read that because I thought this was very thoughtful and very apropos for today's get-together in self-care and wellness. You can see that it doesn't matter what schools do this coming fall or even during second semester, there's going to be a percentage of the population that are going to be angry and frustrated and feel like the schools are not doing what they're supposed to do. And as you know and speak to educators or those people who are in charge of making the plans, they don't know either because there is this second round, or they're calling it maybe inning 3 of the first spike. So no one is really sure on how to proceed, and yet those magical days of school starting up in the fall are just around the corner. So if you look at the next slide, the upcoming school year might be one of the toughest ever to be an educator, but it also might be the most exciting and revolutionary year ever. Mindset will be critical. I know that we cannot control this viral pandemic, the impact it is having on our economy, our lives, nor the growing racial tension in our society today. However, I'm realizing I can control my response to these challenges, and maybe even more, I can might positively impact the response of others. Today's theme is, again, support and self-care. All of these issues are not only dominating the news cycles and conversations, each is also leaving our students, our families, our colleagues, and ourselves with uncertainty, frustration, and fear. You know, I don't know about you, but over these past few months, I have found myself experiencing a great deal of anger, hurt, fear, frustration, anxiety, and definitely uncertainty. I know that each of these feelings brings about not only a physiological, but a psychological and a spiritual change in my well-being. I need to take care of that because I cannot control what's going on. I can only control how I react to it. You know, as an educator, years ago, you were trained in pedagogy and teaching strategies and how to reach hard-to-reach kids. But you weren't trained to be counselors and mentors and guides and all the other things that you serve on a day-to-day, and you're going to even be needed more to do those things come this fall with, again, all of the uncertainty in the lives of our children and our children's family. During our time together, you will have a great opportunity to listen to and take an active role in learning or renewing wellness strategies, in supporting your wellness and the care you provide for others. We are excited to have Dr. David Hanson with us today. Dr. Hanson is the chair of the Department of Educational Psychology, Psychology and Research in Education. Dr. Hanson specializes in adolescent development. His area of focus for today will be on why it is imperative that socio-emotional learning align with 4 adolescent-specific brain changes in order to promote positive mental health that leads to resilience, especially in these uncertain times. We are also extremely blessed to have 3 accomplished social workers from area schools, districts. Today, they will be addressing issues of wellness and support for all of the changes that continue to occur in our lives. During all of their presentations, please be sure to access the Q&A button on the bottom right-hand side of your screen to submit a question that you may have regarding any of the information being presented. Tracy Chauvin is an active social worker in the Shawnee Mission School District. She will be co-presenting with another very caring and successful social worker, Tina Hafke. Tina is a licensed social worker and has held a number of positions over the years. She is also certified in collaborative problem solving through Massachusetts General. She will be working for the Auburn-Washburn School District as a behavioral specialist starting this fall. Jose Cornejo is a mental health facilitator for the Lawrence Public Schools. He works to facilitate the active connection between Lawrence stakeholders and the community mental health services. Jose will present a plan that wraps around support service for students and families that ties together with the learning that goes on in schools. As I mentioned before, again, each of our panelists, as they present, you can pose questions in the Q&A box at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Before I turn this over to my esteemed colleague, Dr. Deb Purbeck, we would like to get to know you a little bit better. Would you please take a few seconds to answer the two questions in the poll that now will appear on your screen? Fantastic. We still have a few more people adding to the, don't forget there are two questions. What area of the country are you from and what is your current role in the educational system? With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Deb Purbeck.
Hi, thank you, Joe. As the polls are finishing, I want to just kind of talk a little bit about the process for today. We will have all four presenters or panelists present, and then following that, I'll pose questions that you, our audience, will actually submit. So we'll start off today with Dr. David Hanson.
There we go. Sorry, I'm a little slow on the technology too. So, hey, welcome in this really odd time that we're finding ourselves in. It is approximately a little after 2, and this is the time when we work at home that our dogs tend to want to bark. I have my dog and my door is closed, but it is delivery time here in our neighborhood. So if you hear him barking, please just, I can't do anything about it. So we'll have to just go forward. So thank you. So I'm gonna focus on kind of this idea of adolescence as the socio-emotional learning character development model, trying to create a model that really promotes success and well-being. This whole topic is so relevant at this moment in our country, where norms have been changed drastically because of the pandemic. All sorts of things are going on within the environment. So it's quite relevant. And I tend to view, I come at it from a positive development perspective. And I view socio-emotional learning, character development, I'm gonna mingle those terms together. I view that as really a resource, as a tool that can address and support resilience and well-being later on. So, you know, any good teacher worth their salt has objectives. And so I have these objectives and for presenting here today. So the first is trying to convince you. I've been studying adolescent development for quite a while now, and really am convinced that there are some unique socio-emotional learning needs that adolescents have. And I think they are distinct or unique to adolescents. And I said needs, I meant to say need. There's one in particular I think that we need to focus on. So my goal is to convince you of that. Second, I'm also here to provoke in a good way, provoke you in a good way, and get you to see if I can have you question kind of how good or how appropriate is our current socio-emotional learning based standards. How appropriate is that for adolescent development with what I'm going to present? And then I'm going to try to persuade you to push for some SELCD standards that match adolescent development. So that's what I'm trying to accomplish. We'll see how we do. And I realize I need to make it clear that when I talk about adolescence, I am talking from puberty to age 18. That's where I draw the line. There are a lot of reasons that you don't want me to get into. And so, but just so you have that as your frame of reference, that's what I'm referring to. So I thought it's always good. Let's start at the very, my wife likes to read the end or watch the end of a movie first and then go back and fill in. I tend to be one of those that I'd rather be surprised, but they say when you're giving presentations, it's good to give the ending. And so the ending of today, where I am heading, is to say really, hopefully, that we will arrive at the same point of, I think our current curricular standards are based on I'm going to call it the wrong model. I put that in quotes because I don't want people to get upset with me. I think it's not a bad model, but it is at least an incomplete one for adolescents. Next, I will get around to saying, here's what I think is the appropriate developmental model that we need to go with. I was going to give you that ending, then I changed my mind, hence I put the question mark in there. And if you're not aware of what this movie clip is from and who this is, that means you're probably a whole lot younger than I am. But I'll let you figure that out. You can figure it out online if you want. So, all right, so here's the outline where I am going. Here's where we're going. I'm going to get us all, hopefully we can all start on the same page 1. And to kind of look at, so when I say socio-emotional learning, SEL, and when you see SELCD, character development, that we're all kind of having the same framework. The saying goes, and I'm talking with teachers, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir on this one, so we don't need to spend a lot of time on it because you are all very familiar with these. And then kind of once we're on the same page, what I'd like us to do is kind of look at what does research say about the developmental goal for adolescence, the SEL goal. And I think there's an interesting picture that is emerging really within the last 10 years or so based on brain science of adolescent development. So we're going to spend, and I promise I won't get into the weeds, but I'll give you a high level summary. And then what I'm calling getting real, which is I can give you a very simple litmus test as to why and how this operates in adults. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about kind of what would an adolescent SELCD curriculum look like. I'm just going to start saying SEL because saying that is a mouthful, SELCD. So socio-emotional learning. A lot of what we know from socio-emotional learning comes out of research on adolescents or youth in the out-of-school field. And so this is a very common model. This is the Castle model. And they have it broken down into 5 areas. These will all look familiar with you as educators in some form. So they break socio-emotional learning into things like self-awareness, to be able to identify, for example, to identify emotions, to recognize to recognize strengths, to have self-confidence, self-efficacy. Then there's the social awareness, perspective taking, empathy, respect for others. And then we have responsible decision making. Again, you recognize these, so I'm going to start skipping over. We have self-management, relationship skills. All of these socio-emotional skills or learning emphases that we're looking at are tied back to a literature on development in the out of school. That was kind of where it came out of the positive youth development model. So out of that, then these models, there's several of these. This is the most common one. Came state standards. This is coming from the Kansas Socio-Emotional Learning Character Development Standards, and from I think their most recent revision was 2018. I'm assuming if most of you are instructors or teachers or in the schools, you will recognize these. I just took a snapshot of one, and it doesn't have all the standards down below it. But just so you know, this is what we're talking about. So for this one, we have personal development and the area of self-awareness, self-management. You can see how it ties back to those skills. So going back to the Castle model for 1 minute, I want to ask you a question of what's missing? What's missing for adolescents? I think there's something really missing here for adolescents. I like all of these, don't get me wrong, but I think there's something missing. And that's something that I'm going to focus on today. Okay, so let's dive into the summary of the research. I've taught a whole class on these, so I can take an entire semester, and I'm going to boil it down to like 4 slides, as best I can, and give you the highest level summary. If you I would love to know if you teach adolescents, junior high on up, maybe 6th grade now. If you do, kind of let me know, because I'm curious to see who's out there. But if you do, or if you've had adolescents, you won't have any problem recognizing these. First of all, we have, there are some changes that go on in adolescents' brains. Most of us are aware of, we know these, we've experienced these. I've had 2 adolescents and I'm on to a grandchild now, so I lived through these. I loved adolescence. I was one of the crazy parents who said, bring it, get rid of childhood, I am ready to go into adolescence. And so these are the things that you will see. There are changes in their motivation and reward, and their emotions. There are changes in what we call this area of the brain called the social network. So I'm talking about these as networks in the brain. There are changes in what's called the executive network, and then the Salience Network. And I'm going to try to explain these in a snapshot and say, here's why it leads to this, what I think is a developmental goal, a socio-emotional learning goal for adolescents. And I did see some people raising hands, so thank you. That was good to see. There. Okay, so motivational network. You don't have to spend much time at all with adolescents to realize that I've had parents like, oh, she's so emotional. It's like, well, yeah, that's not a bad thing, but we do know that there are some changes to these these emotion networks during adolescence. And this is an interesting one. And so the changes that happen, basically, you get you get this increase in emotional sensitivity. And it's not just emotion, but it's motivational sensitivity. So emotions and motivation, they function to incentivize our behavior. I will say it here. I won't have time to show you why this is true. But if you ever have a class with me, you will know this by heart, is you have never had a logical thought without emotion, but you've had emotion without logical thinking. And so emotion, motivation, it's a positive thing. It motivates our behavior. It's what motivates us to focus on and tells us what to pay attention to. So, you know, it also assigns kind of this tentative value to what you're experiencing. Yes, I really like that. I have some leftover M&Ms. And so I finally started diving into those. And the value is I really like chocolate M&Ms. And it assigns that value. If I eat too many of those, I'm in trouble. And I get my COVID body going on here, sitting too much, eating too much. But it assigns a value to that. That's motivation, that's emotion. It pushes us to exert effort. It helps prioritize our thinking. So we all have this network. And even from early childhood, it's all there. But during adolescence, something really unique happens. During adolescence, you get this hyper responsiveness, this hypersensitivity in these systems. So what it does is, what that means is that emotions and motivation become amplified. It really kind of increases the experience of affect. Some of my research colleagues at other places talk about nothing ever feels as good as it did in high school or in adolescence. And it's all downhill from there. I disagree totally, somewhat, but the intensity of it. So motivation, you've got adolescents now that have this really responsive and sensitive system. And it intensifies that value, that experience that they have, that they associate the emotion with it. The good news is they don't stay there forever. And if you are a parent with adolescents right now in this stage, it's early adolescence especially, hang in there, it gets better. And so it's a temporary change. And it tends to be stronger early on. Okay, so what? Well, the meaning is simply this. Adolescents tend to experience behaviors as more rewarding or boring than at any time in their life. They tend to also filter all of their experiences through motivational or emotional lenses, much more so than you and I do. And so think of going through life where we operate here, but now your emotion and motivation operates here. That's early adolescence, especially. That's what's going on. So next, we have what has been described as the social brain, the social network, another thing that's happening in adolescence. What is a social brain? We call it the default network. We've learned a lot about this. Basically, what this part of our brain does is help us perceive different aspects of ourself. I really had to struggle with adjusting to virtual because I don't like seeing myself, and I forgot to hide myself in the upper corner. and I have to learn how to ignore that. But I'm interested in how am I projecting myself to you? That's all default. That's all social brain network stuff. So we get these in the moment aspects of ourselves. We can picture ourselves in the future. You know, even 5-year-olds or 7-year-olds can say, here's what I want to be when I grow up. They can envision that. Probably not realistic. Well, maybe some of them, but that's the area of the brain we're talking about. This is also an area that helps us understand really complex social relationships. With all that has been happening with the pandemic, you know, wear a mask, don't wear a mask, those are very complex social issues. That's part of our understanding of those issues ties back to our default, this social brain. So it's, you know, slowly developing over time, but then the cool thing, when puberty hits, there is a major restructuring of this network. If you haven't been to a junior high dance, I encourage you to go just to chaperone, just for fun. I did this with my daughter. My son really wasn't interested, but hey, I'm studying adolescence, so I'm going to be there. And the value of social relationships and peers, and you know, the boys were in one gym, the girls were in another, and then when it was slow dance, you know, there was like this herd that would come along, and then they'd all go and slow dance, and then after that, the boys would separate back out and go play in the other gym. And there's all these dynamics going on. But during adolescence, you get this major restructure, major reworking of that network. And so they're adding connections, they're getting rid of ones that aren't useful, and they're really learning even more complex rules of social rules, societal rules as well. So these changes are permanent. The motivational, emotional stuff, it's a temporary, but this is a permanent change. So what does this mean? Well, if you've been around them, you know that adolescents can be there's an acute awareness of the social world, of their social world. You can see an increased complex understanding of their world and everything that goes into that, and understanding others and so forth. It's a time when that happens. Executive network. This is the one I get least excited about, maybe because we've known about it for so much longer. But these are the things that we associate, just think logic, reasoning. This is where most of that happens, loosely speaking. But the function of our executive network is to kind of regulate our thinking, regulate our behavior. We set goals, we can problem solve, we can inhibit our behavior sometimes. We can exercise self-discipline, unless it's chocolate M&Ms. That we can engage in logical thinking. This part of the brain also goes under a major restructuring during adolescence. And I won't get into the details of the neural development here, but it's at the rate in all of these areas, at the rate as it was in 0 to about 3. The changes that are going on, that the rate of change and production and synapse and pruning, all of this. So this is an area that develops and it attains adult levels of performance, adolescents can about age 15. I know that some of us would like to think that can't be that early, but they can, if we're only looking at executive functions. Again, these are permanent changes. If you noticed in the function, some of these things sound a lot like socio-emotional skills, goal setting, problem solving, self-discipline. That is part of the socio-emotional. Well, what does it mean for adolescence? Adolescence really means that they have this ability to reason, plan, solve problems, regulate their self in very, kind of like adults do. I talk about adolescents usually by 15 to 16 are fully capable of anything you and I are capable of, mentally, thinking wise. We know it's not always actualized, so let me make that clear. But then again, I could also point to adults saying, well, we don't always actualize it either. But it's something that goes on, and it's this incredible growth there. And then the last network, and we're getting on to the good stuff, this is the one that we found out about a few years ago. It's called the Salience Network. Salience meaning importance. There's this network that we have that really only develops, it's there in rudimentary forms, but really only develops starting in adolescence with puberty. And we have a spot in our brain, an area in our brain that assigns motivational, emotional value, the importance, it magnifies the importance of certain things like thinking and actions, and it assigns motivation to those. It assigns a value to that. What it does then, it creates like, this is important. No, this is not, but this is. And so it helps us maintain focus on a goal. If I have a goal, if I am going to be a runner and I can set goals, well, this area helps prioritize that. It's also the area, and this is hint, hint, this is where it gets really important, that it assigns personal meaning and purpose to our life, to our experiences. That only truly fully develops or blossoms during adolescence. I joke around, I don't think I've ever met a 6-year-old who was just pondering like, I just don't know why I'm here on this. I don't understand my purpose in life. If you find a 6-year-old like that, it's scary. They're going to be brilliant, but that's not something you would expect. But I remember if you've worked with adolescents, you know that's something they often ask, why am I doing this? So we have this area that develops, and it's not just to assign meaning, but it's to help create, I'm trying to create meaning out of what's happening. And so changes during adolescence, this is where we have explosive neural growth, you've got a network that's forming that wasn't there before, that it's creating from other different areas. And this is the permanent change. And here's what it means. Adolescents have a really strong drive, and this is a really weird word, but I like it, imbue. It's not something we use very often, but it's basically to embed and regulate the meaning and purpose of what they experience. That is what this helps them do. And it basically salience, the importance, meaning permeates every aspect of self in a way that it was not during childhood. That's a cool one. Oops, I hit the wrong button. Here we go. So what does all this mean? Let me give you a quick summary, then we get to the good stuff. It's coming up in just a moment. Hang in there. What it means is that, yes, we have temporary alterations in motivation and emotion, but I think it's for a purpose. It's a reason. It's trying to get adolescents to focus on something and these developing in these certain areas. We get these changes, but we have changes in the executive and the social networks. Those are needed to help with the Salience Network. We don't want importance and meaning to develop apart from those. I don't want, I didn't want my son or daughter to create importance and meaning in life independent of others or society. So those developments are there. The Salience Network is what is exciting. It's what makes sense out of experience. And that is what is exciting. So here it is. So what is the developmental goal of adolescence? I think the SEL goal. It is to rapidly prepare adolescents to function with purpose and meaning as adult members of society do, the way they do. And you probably are asking, well, do adult members of society really function this way? This is where we get to the litmus test. I'm going to argue we do. So how can I claim that? What's the litmus test? This is actually pretty easy to show you. Fortunately, we can't raise hands, so I suggest you don't in case someone who knows you and has had a meeting. But if you've been in a meeting that there's no reason for you to be there, and you had that feeling of, I just want to run away, get me out of here. I don't know why I'm here. Why was I even included in this? What am I even doing with this? That is your Salience Network at work. Because you and I, most of us don't like to have our time wasted, if you will. We like to know why we're doing something. And so part of this litmus test is, imagine teaching without meaning and purpose. Imagine you were just like, oh, you're going to be a teacher. It's like, I don't want to be. Too bad. You're going to be a teacher. And you ask, well, what am I trying to do in this? And they keep coming back, doesn't matter. You just have to teach them how to do math. Can you imagine trying to teach someone how to do math without knowing why you're trying to do that? You adults, we don't do that. We want to have meaning and purpose behind what we do. I'm not real good at, I can hang out and waste time like anybody, but I really like to know why I'm doing this. And I like to have choice over why I'm doing something. And so you see, this is where adolescence between ages, certainly by age 18, I would argue for right around 16-ish, this system is almost fully developed, not experienced, but it's rewired. And so if their brains are trying to process things the way ours do, imagine what happens if they aren't able to create that meaning and purpose. You can see where I'm going with this. So really, to me, the goal of adolescence is that they are trying to integrate meaning and purpose into everything they do. It's the same way that you and I do it. Excuse me. And so they're trying to, we do that every single day. And so I'm saying by age 18, adolescents essentially have the same wiring in their brains as you and I do. Again, they lack experience, but they have that. And so what is meaningful or purposeful probably won't be similar to adolescence as it is to us. I remember when my son, I was trying to get him like, no, you really need to clean your room. For me, it was meaningful. Outside of, it started getting stinky. You got to get your dirty clothes out of here. And I was trying, I couldn't convince him that was not meaningful to him for a long time. And so what was meaningful for him and what's meaningful for me wasn't the same. But if we want adolescents to understand how to function with meaning and purpose in society, we need to encourage them, support them in that process. And here's where it gets a little controversial. I think we have socially excluded them from doing this. It's nobody's fault. There's no, nefarious purpose out there. But as society has changed, we're delaying it, and we've prolonged adolescence because it takes that much longer. I think because we've excluded them from healthy adult society, and so if their brains are developing in this key moment and they're trying to learn meaning and purpose, but all they can do is learn it within their peers and within themselves, I think that leads to delaying of adolescence and the elongating of adolescence, AKA, I would say they're floundering, looking for that. So for me, the goal, the SEL goal, the socio-emotional learning goal of adolescence is to, from a developmental point of view, is to integrate meaning and purpose into everything they do. Now I'm going to end, and I'm hoping I'm not too far over here, but I'm going to end with this, which is, if I've convinced you, I hope I have, but let's just assume I have. What would a developmentally appropriate socio-emotional learning curriculum look like, or standards look like? I've argued for quite a while, unsuccessfully, but I think we need a curriculum design and educational system that's built on adult learning models. Most of our education it still has childhood learning models. I think we need to broaden that out to the way adults learn. Why do I learn something new? It has a lot to do with meaning and purpose and so forth. I build into it. I think we need to allow for deep, what I would call interest-driven learning that allows for expertise development. I started playing classical guitar when I got to grad school because I needed a hobby. Well, I needed a release, something to keep me sane while I was studying. And the more I got into in years, I'm like, oh, if I had just started in high school or in adolescence, I could have been really good. But I missed my developmental window there for that expertise development. And it's a key time in which they can become experts. And so we need a system that is designed around allowing them to do that. I would say and these are ideas, these are very pie in the sky ideas. I'm not on the ground like many of you are, but I think we need to have a graduated or a funneled learning experience that provides greater depth of learning experience early on, and then allow adolescents to slowly to go into deep dives and really focus on something, specialize in that. And I know we do that to some degree, but I'm even more so. I also think one of the things, how do we support adolescent need for socio-emotional learning connected to the real occupational world? To me, that's an essential part of this. So, whoops, that's what I was trying to get to. Again, I'm trying to just get us to think through what would it look like? And how do we create, so getting back to, and I don't have those here, but the castle model, all of those things that we talk about are really good. The self-discipline, the self-awareness, adolescents need that. But I think there's that piece that is missing is this, now take meaning and purpose and apply it on top of that. How do we create a system that allows adolescents to do that? And I think in this day and age, with what is happening in society, meaning and purpose is everywhere to be found if we let them. Okay, now I get to be quiet and give up my screen and go on to the next. Deb?
Awesome. Deb, or do I pick up from here?
Oh, whoever picks up from there, sorry.
I think I'll pick up from here, David.
Okay.
Deb, did you have something first? I'm sorry, I didn't hear Deb. I'm gonna go ahead and go, if that's okay. Yeah, thank you, David. That just really makes me start thinking about our response to these adolescents that have this increasingly emotional sensitivity, like you said, We know that's the time of their development where they are oversensitive and trying to put meaning and purpose. And so what's our role in their wellness during this time, as well as our own wellness during this time as we're trying to coexist with them? So I'm just going to broadly kind of talk about that here for a couple minutes, and then Tracy's going to give us much more specific strategies that we can do to achieve that. And the main three areas that I'm going to really talk about is regulation, connection, and felt safety. And even though those are definitely correspond with the adolescent brain, they also can be incorporated with elementary students as well. So I'm going to talk just a little more broadly in terms of any student that we're working with that might be having some challenging in behavior or not learning at the rate that we're hopeful that they would be. What our response is to that in regards to regulation, connection, and felt safety. I'm going to try and share my screen as well, just real quick, if I can. And I am sure most of you are very familiar with Dr. Perry's work, but I think as we're looking at going into the school year and starting out the year, it's really good to get real focused on this again, on how do we help develop these skills for kids. And we know through much research that that regulation piece that David, you were making reference to, that regulation piece is so important. So when we talk about regulation, we're talking about feeling physically and emotionally settled. And when we feel settled, then we're able to connect. We're able to relate and connect and feel more comfortable with those around us. And only then, after we have those two components, are we able to reason? Are we able to reflect? Are we able to learn? And I'm going to even say that's where we start to put that meaning and purpose into our lives and reasoning after we have that regulation and that connection. Joe, you said something at the very beginning. Well, actually, it was in that sheet that you first shared with us that caught my attention. And it said, we're all doing the best that we can. And I feel like as educators, as we're going back into the school year for our own wellness, and knowing that we're coming from a very unusual situation from the end of the school year, that if we can go into it with the assumption that we're all doing the best that we can, that our approach will be a much more healthy approach, and maybe I would say appropriate approach. Because if we're assuming people are doing the best that they can and they're not doing well, then our role is to help and assist and do what we can. But if we're assuming they're just not trying, that leaves us gives us less options. The other piece that I wanted to share with you in terms more specifically about that connection and co-regulation, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Brene Brown. But again, as a good reminder, BreneBrown.com has tons of resources to help us with these connections, with this regulation and connections. On this page, her classroom integration ideas. Over here, you can see the downloads. Those are all clickable downloads. Staying kind, being curious, going into these conversations with students, not needing to fix anything, but just trying to understand how they feel, and then being grateful if they do share. I'm thinking of adolescence. David, you made the reference to your son's bedroom, right? It probably was a few conversations of discussion, of understanding the why he feels there was no meaning in cleaning the bedroom. But when they do share that, we're grateful that they do. So just to break it down a little bit, to be empathetic really comes down to just a few very basic skills that we can do to help. And one of them is reflective listening. So with reflective listening, what I'm referring to is just really repeating back what you're hearing them say. David, I'm going to use your example again. I loved your bedroom example, right? Cleaning the bedroom, but a classic issue we have as parents. So reflecting back when they do share why they don't think there's any meaning, so they know they're being heard, is so important in that development of helping them stay calm and us stay calm as well. Asking questions. A lot of kids don't want to talk. They'll start shutting down. So we have to use educated guesses, saying things like, I've just really noticed that you've been struggling. I'm wondering if it has something to do with, and we throw out a guess. Maybe right, maybe wrong, but it's a great way to start that discussion. Again, going into it with that mindset that we're not there to fix anything, but that it's more of a, I can tell you're struggling and I'm here and concerned. And then when they do share, saying, hey, thank you for telling me that. Now that really gives me some understanding of why you're not wanting to clean your bedroom, why you are struggling with these emotions and this hyper response, as your wording was, David, right? Sometimes the response seems so hyper response to us, it doesn't match the expectation we're giving them. However, if we can get them to share and thank them for that, they're going to be more likely to stay engaged, and it regulates us as well. So the last thing I'm going to just talk about briefly, and then I'm going to have Tracy give us some real good specific examples of actually how to do this, is that felt safety. Feeling safe is very state dependent, meaning we have to be emotionally regulated before we can feel safe. And I think, David, again, I keep referring back to you because you are making such critical points that we cannot have logical thought until we have go through our emotional process. So we have to have that emotional process before we can feel safe. And we have to be regulated as adults before we can create that for the youth. And that's where our wellness comes in. Easier said than done, right? When you're dealing with a hypersensitive adolescent or even a kindergartner, it doesn't matter. Our own ability to stay regulated is often the challenge. Just thinking of a youngster who maybe had an unpredictable event saying, we're not going to go out to recess today because of the weather. And their strong reaction, they might tear up papers and have a strong reaction to that, where it feels to us that that wasn't a reasonable response to this unpredictable event. That I just want to highlight resiliency. And resiliency, we know if we can create environments that are predictable, that have moderate level of stress in a controlled environment, we can build resiliency and help kids with these developmental stages and help them stay regulated. And through the educational process, we have to create stress. It's the way the brain works. We have to create some level of moderate stress. But when we get into too much unpredictability, severe stress, and that stress is prolonged, that's when we end up with this vulnerable population that doesn't make the academic gains that we're hoping that they will make, and honestly tend to maybe be disruptive in our classrooms, that we don't feel like we can be as effective as a teacher. So what we're always trying to do is keep those vulnerable states to a minimum, trying to keep people regulated, connecting with kids so we can reason and learn with them. And we know our past experiences are what create these responses. And we've had we're gonna have 6 months of kids not being at school that have had a lot of experiences. And some of those are gonna be positive and some of those maybe not. And so we just have to be mindful of what these experiences are, and hopefully can, through an empathetic connection response, start to connect with kids again as they come back to school. Tracy, I think I'm going to throw it to you. Have you give us some good, great, specific strategies on how to do this?
Thanks, Tina. So think about what David has said and what Tina has said. When we talk about that sort of hierarchy of what our brain needs, the number one thing is regulation. And like Tina and David had said, this is what our brain needs. And so it needs as an adult, as a young child, as an adolescent. And so how can we as adults stay regulated and model that for our students? And so some of the tips and tricks that we're going to be talking about now can be done both virtually if needed or in person. They're great for both. And so one of the first things is promoting self-care routines, encouraging yourself and your students to make a plan each day. Those plans can include, who will I connect with today? Being intentional about building connections. When will I get into nature today? Because I know personally being stuck in my kitchen, which is where I'm at now, my dining room table, has taken a toll on me as I was meeting with students and teachers the past few months. So I started moving around my house and then as I could outside. When will I get into nature today? How will I move my body today? There was a joke about COVID body or something like that earlier. It's the truth. We're sitting, we're stagnating. How will we move our body? We're meant to move. Being intentional about that. What am I grateful for today? What will I look for to be grateful for today? Because we understand that gratitude builds resilience. It builds hope. How will I be creative today? Those passions, those purposes that we have. Thinking of that as intentional self-care, take that time for you and your students. It takes about 90 seconds and it can be done virtually and in person. It can be a thought moment. It can be a turn-in moment via a Google something. It can be a handwritten. It can be on a whiteboard, whatever works with your routine. And then also time that into reflection. Ask them at the end of the day or at the end of the week, when was your brain most focused? Getting them to think about those thought patterns, getting them to think about what works for them. How did my brain and body indicate it was time to move? So that they can be aware of, be it in-person schooling or virtual schooling, these are those moments that I need a break before I become dysregulated. I can be aware of my brain and body and the patterns there. And what did I need that maybe I didn't get? So they can also be aware of that so that you can be aware of that. I know that I personally need time alone. I'm a very introverted extrovert. So being around people is amazing and great, but I know I also need time alone to refresh and recharge. At the end of the day, if I didn't get it, I'm frustrated, I'm grumpy, and I typically take it out on my husband. And so I will be grumpy. He's like, whoa, you spent all day with people. You peopled all day. So being aware of those things, these reflection questions can help us with that. Another thing that is really, really useful for us and our students is thinking about, as a reflection question, what was a time that I persevered, that I went through, thinking of that growth mindset and building that, thinking of that resilience that Tina spoke about. How did I do it? So not just acknowledging that you did it, but how did you do it? What skills did you use? What tools did you use? So those are really, really easy ways to create some moments of self-care throughout your day, at the beginning, at the end of the week, and then also thinking about daily routines. How can you build morning meetings that could incorporate these self-care plans, these questions into them? You can do this virtually or in person. These morning meetings don't have to take a ton of time, which is the best part of them. Rituals, affirmations. I know it seems goofy, but I tell myself, specifically like before I came onto here, I told myself, I'm confident, I can do this, I am focused. And those are the affirmations that I use before big things. They help me just pause, focus on what my intent is for what I'm about to do. You can put those on your virtual whiteboards. You can put them on your in-person whiteboards. A daily affirmation that you repeat to yourself as a person and then as a class, you can say it out loud. You would be amazed by the sheer smiles you get from our sixth graders when we have them and we say, I'm amazing, I'm excellent, I'm focused before a test. It really boosts that mood and makes you feel confident and secure that you are normalizing these strategies for self-care. Also journaling. Normalizing journaling is huge. You can have question prompts as part of your daily routine. You can do that across curricular areas. What is it that you can journal about that maybe was frustrating right now? And having your students and yourself take moments out of your day to intentionally write some of those emotions out can make it so that, and little kids can do this too, they can draw in their journals, you guys. This is all ages. that can do this. Make it so that we're not having moments where we're tearing the paper up like Tina spoke of earlier, because we're getting those emotions out in a healthy way. We are teaching co-regulation. We're teaching our students tools because we're modeling it for them ourselves, and we're staying regulated throughout our day. Doing frequent check-ins throughout the day, thumbs up, thumbs down, just basic small things. You can also do them virtually, where you create a check-in sheet that is part of your virtual classroom. And it can be so much fun. I'm going to put a plug in now. I highly encourage you guys to go look at the website that KU has provided with all the resources from every single day, because I know that we have each put a bunch of resources there for you, and they go into more detail about what we're speaking about as well. And now there's a poll question up here. As we're having this conversation, how comfortable are you promoting these tools and this awareness in your classroom? So just take a second and think about that. Am I extremely comfortable with promoting these tools and resources in my classroom? Does it make me a little uncomfortable, but I'm there, I can get with it? Or am I extremely uncomfortable? This takes me out of my comfort zone. And maybe if we're at that spot, we can try one practice ourselves as the adult so that we can get a little more comfortable with that. So I'm looking forward to what your answers are, you guys. The other really extremely easy tool that we can use is mindfulness. And specifically, my favorite one is Calm Classroom. It's a great resource that's out there, you guys. It's scripted and guided deep breathing exercises. My specific favorite is the triangle one. And the kids all know when I say, hey, we're gonna do deep breaths, they're like, we're doing triangle breathing, right? I'm like, yeah, your choice, my choice. If it's my choice, that's what we're doing, you guys. There's also some videos out there by a person named Just Me, and he does amazing videos that are highly engaging that many of our students can connect with. He's an African-American male that's modeling mindfulness for us. One of the best resources I've ever seen out there. And so these are some easy tools that we can use for any learning that we have going on. And so now I'm throwing it to, I believe, Jose for some more information there. Ooh, okay, I'm loving these responses.
Thank you very much, Tracy.
Thanks, Jose.
So I'm Jose Cornejo. I'm the mental health facilitator for Lawrence Public Schools. And one of the lovely jobs I have is the opportunity to collaborate with community members, organizations, and agencies that provide mental and behavioral health to our students, as well as our staff. We're seeing the need recently in the last few years for social, emotional, and mental health support for our teachers and staff members. 3 years ago, a colleague of mine, Dr. Bob Durgan, and I started doing a self-care presentation for our teachers on stress management. The title was Help, How Do I Manage My Stress? And as a result of that, HR came over and talked to us and said, what are you guys doing? We asked them, well, what do you mean? We're doing a presentation on how do you manage your stress? And what happened was the request for the EAP assistance went up, just skyrocketed by about 60% when we started providing those in-house presentations. And so one of the things I would encourage you to do as we move forward is ask ourselves, how can we provide some quality PD for our teachers and staff members when we come back in August or whenever we get to come back. And one of the things that I had an opportunity to do this morning was read a wonderful article this morning put out by EdSurge. And the title of the article was Teachers Are Living in a Tinderbox of Stressful Conditions. And it gave some really great suggestions on what can we do to support our teachers when we come back. And one of the things I would suggest is how do we bring the community into these strategies to help us navigate what our needs are? Because one of the conversations my director, Kevin Harrell, and I have quite often is this is not just a public school issue, the social, emotional, mental health, well-being of our students. It's a community issue. And so how do we collaborate with all of the community agencies within our systems to meet the needs of our students and families. And we're very blessed in Lawrence. I'm going to tell you that up front. We have Bird Nash Mental Health Center that we collaborate with quite regularly. And we have a partnership with them since 1998 called the WRAP program, which is working to recognize alternative possibilities. And they provide a therapist, a social worker, or clinician of some level in our buildings. And so we have 2 at each high schools. We have 1 in each middle school. And we have 3 that share 6 grade schools. And so we're very blessed and lucky to have that program within our school system, because it's one more support to not only meet with kids, but it's one other individual that can help families make that transition from schools to the mental health system, or whatever other agency families are most comfortable with. The other thing is, we have University of Kansas just up the street from our schools. And so we collaborate quite a bit with KU Child and Family Clinic. I work quite a bit with Dr. Paula Feit on doing PD for our staff, but also she's developed some curriculum on how to manage anxiety. And so she created this wonderful curriculum for schools on how to manage anxiety that can be taught to kids, either by mental health professionals or by teachers. We also collaborate with the School of Social Welfare. Professors come and do PDs for us, but we also have interns from the School of Social Welfare that work with our school social workers. We also collaborate with Headquarters quite a bit. In this last year, Headquarters, which is the Crisis Center and Suicide Prevention Center in Douglas County, they developed the suicide prevention training for our teachers for the entire county. So every district in our Douglas County, which included Lawrence, Eudora, Baldwin, in Prairie Lecompton, we had the same slide presentation, sharing very similar information. And that's something the superintendents wanted done, and that was through collaboration between DECA and Headquarters. And with that, we're using the same language because those kids come to the same mental health center. They come to the same hospital when they're being screened when they're in crisis. And we're also collaborating with Lawrence Memorial Hospital to track how many students are being screened, so that we have that information, so that we can support those kids when they come back to school. Because oftentimes kids go receive a screening for hospitalization and they don't meet the criteria, and they come back to school the next day, and we oftentimes have no idea that they were screened. And the idea is, what type of supports can we provide those students so that we can provide a safe, nurturing environment, and maybe they need a pass to go see the counselor or the school social worker when needed, as they begin to maybe spiral into another crisis because something in a class or a peer said something to trigger them. And that gives them an opportunity to go get the support they need. So my work really is calling these individuals and saying, hey, would you be interested in having a conversation on how we can collaborate and work together as 2 systems to support the needs of our students? And then the other thing that we're really moving into in this, we started this last spring before the pandemic hit and shut things down, but at Lawrence High School, we created a student advisory mental health group. And so we're really tapping into our high school students and giving them a voice at the table to say, what are your needs here at the school level? What would you like to see when it comes to mental, social, emotional health and supports? And then the other piece of that is, what can you do to help us support your peers in the schools? And so those kids, we met pretty regularly, and they had some really great ideas. And we were in the middle of putting together a form that we were going to invite speakers to. And the first topic was going to be anxiety. And we had it planned in April, and we never had an opportunity to see it through. But we're planning to offer it this coming September, and we're either going to do it in probably a combination of in-house as well as virtual. And so we're going to go ahead and plan on offering that form for students and families on how to manage and navigate anxiety. And I think it'll be a real relevant topic as we come back to school. I think the big key takeaway is I know that we all come from various sizes of communities, but getting to know who are your mental health providers in your area, and what type of supports can they offer, and if you don't have mental health teams in your buildings, how can you bring your counselors, your social workers, your school psychologists, your parent facilitators, if you have them, at the table pretty regularly to look at what are the needs of our students and staff members, and how can we support them on a regular basis? What additional tiered supports? What can we do at a tier 1 to really boost our social emotional mental health supports for our students? And then how do we narrow the gap so that we're providing quality tier 2, tier 3 supports for those students that may need additional doses of support? And if you don't have the capacity to provide those tier 3 supports, who in your community could we partner with and possibly come in and facilitate some of those groups based on what the students' needs are in our buildings? So I will leave you with the fact that you know, we got to find a way. I think we have a great opportunity moving forward to bring this together as a community opportunity to address the needs of our students. And really the key is just figuring out who is that individual I can reach out to and begin the conversation with. And basically that's what I did. I just started having conversations with the members in our community and really explaining to them what we're trying to do at the building level and how they could support us as a district. Bird Nash was a given because they were already in our school system. But nurturing the relationship with University of Kansas and DECA and the various other agencies in our community was because I was willing to pick up the phone and have that conversation. So I will turn it back to Joe, and I guess we'll be open for questions.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Tina and Tracy and Dr. Hansen for some wonderful words of wisdom. Actually, I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Purbeck for a Q&A. But before I do, I would just like to say, since I have a dog barking also, David, in the background, since my dissertation was on wellness, while we provide all these supports for our students, for our colleagues, for our parents, and just about everybody else connected to the school, we must take care of ourselves. We must take care of ourselves. You as a teacher have the right to ask questions of the things you fear, the things that you are anxious about as you return to school. You need to start support groups with your colleagues so that you can share stories, both good and bad, and know that you're not an island unto yourself. So I just would like to leave you with that. And then Deb, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay, thanks, Joe. I think there's a question, and this goes to Tracy, Tina, or Jose. Could you suggest some specific support strategies to help each other help our kids?
Just to clarify, Deb, are you saying help each other, meaning as in adults in the school systems?
Yes.
You know,
go ahead, Jose.
One of the things that we have done in our school district through wellness is teachers pair up with teachers and administrators help with this, so that I am partnered with somebody that maybe I don't traditionally associate with on a regular basis, because we have a tendency to gravitate to those that we're the most comfortable with. But what they do is they have a peer partner that provides support, somebody that can check in on me. And one of the things we have is a self-care plan for our teachers, and that allows me to go check in with my partner, and they check in with me to see how I'm doing on my self-care plan. So, and then the other thing they do is they create walking groups or yoga groups after school, and they do it at school because they know if they do it at school, they get it done, versus, you know, when I get home and if I sit in that magic recliner, I don't get back up.
Jose, I was going to just kind of say a similar thing, maybe in a more formal way. I know a lot of schools have coaches or mentors that they partner for new professionals when they come in. But I think that's a model that just needs to be continued throughout, not just for that first year or second year teacher, that if we can provide those support systems for ongoing mentoring and coaching. We know those models, research has told us, those are the best way we learn as adults, is through coaching and mentoring and having another professional colleague to collaborate with. And I think it goes back to the same structure as I said before. When we are together as professionals, be kind, be curious, ask. When we notice things aren't going well, be able to be vulnerable enough to ask, like, I notice you're struggling, what's up? And knowing you don't have to fix it, but you just have to have these opportunities to come together to talk and then try to understand what the other person is feeling. To me, it goes back to empathy and creating these empathetic environments in our school system, either in a formal or an informal way.
I agree with what they've been saying. I think that if you're able to put structures in place that normalize peer-to-peer support is the most important thing. Be it a mentor, be it walkabout Wednesdays, where anybody that wants to get together and just talk through some stuff, regardless of grade level, regardless of content area, you show up at a designated time, a designated space right after school, and you pick a partner and you walk and talk it out. Whatever it is that you can put in place as an informal leader within your building, be it as I'm a second grade teacher, I'm a 10th grade teacher, I teach whatever it is, but say, hey, I'd really like to do this. If there are other people interested, come join me. And just you take the initiative to do that, I think is a huge piece of it. I also think finding people that you vibe with. I go on vibes a lot. People that you vibe with, that you know that you can trust and talk with, are really, really important when we're in such a stressful time. And we're in such a stressful time, you guys. Like, let's just say that flat out. And so finding people that you can just connect with and go, oh, this happened. Do you have 10 minutes to talk? Oh man, can we just talk for 5 minutes? I understand that you're really busy too. You've got family, you've got everything going on. But finding those people that provide that unconditional support and connection.
Okay, thank you. Jose, you mentioned a number of resources that you access here because, quite frankly, location. How do we provide these types of interactions you were talking about in communities that are isolated or much smaller, do not have an area or local mental health center?
I think if anything that we've learned from COVID is that we have the capacity to reach somebody anywhere they are, as long as they have an internet signal, right? Mm-hmm. So I think, if you take like Dr. Hansen's presentation and cut it out, and that could possibly be a training that's facilitated by somebody that is comfortable moderating his presentation, and then possibly if there's questions and answers, maybe he could zoom in and answer those questions, or maybe those questions could be emailed to him and then he can get back to that staff. That's one way. The other way is, a lot of these university professors travel around to various satellite communities and maybe figuring out what their schedule is. I know that there's a professor up at the KU School of Social Welfare, and he's out in Dodge City or Garden City, once or twice a month, teaching classes out there. And so if it's possible to get on their schedule and see if they'd be willing to come facilitate. But I think Zoom or whatever platform it is, would allow us to possibly record some training sessions that could be utilized in that setting, or possibly reaching out to other social workers or mental health professionals in other districts and possibly allowing them the space where they could zoom into a training and facilitate it for your staff. Greenbush does a wonderful job of that.
Okay, thank you. I have another question. As we transition into next school year, many districts are looking to having to offer remote and online options for their learners at all levels. Many teachers have expressed concerns about building relationships and nurturing their students, especially through asynchronous lessons. Tracy, how are you helping to alleviate the fears of educators that feel like the digital environment can't provide this? And is it as simple as showcasing examples to them, or have you had any specific trainings?
I think that that's a very valid and a great question, is how do you build connection from a distance is what it really boils down to. And I think that we have to move past thinking of it as asynchronous learning and also think of it as time to get retro with connections. Postcards, phone calls, text messages are all ways to build connections. I know that within my building and other buildings in the Shawnee Mission School District, we had family liaisons. And so it was not who you would expect. I know some districts have family school liaisons as a position throughout the year. This was the specials teachers, art, music, PE, library, paraprofessionals, teachers' aides, office staff, each getting a group of about 10 families and myself and our instructional coach. We used everybody and said, here are 10 families that are your families to connect with. And so we met as a team every single week and said, who could you connect with? Who could you didn't? Did you have a concern for me, the social worker? Do you have a concern that needs to go to the principal? And we debriefed it. And I personally found the most success with families when I offered up text messages in the evening. And it was a way for me to say, hey, the teacher hasn't seen you yet. Like, what's going on? Oh, this, and this happened. Mom had this happen. Dad is out of work. Dad moved somewhere else to get some work. Like all these different things. And I was able to tell the teacher, who then went, oh, okay, now I know I need to connect with them at 7 p.m. via the phone. Google Classroom is not the way to get it. And so we were able to build connections that way by putting a system in place to give multiple options for connections. And I think that that's one of the things that I've really talked with teachers about prior to even moving to online is, as long as there's a connection, it doesn't matter who it's with. This is a we moment. A school is a community. Let's all wrap around our families, especially right now, and communicate with each other as staff members and as peers and as support people to each other.
Okay, thank you. I have another question, and this is perhaps for David. How is the SELCD different for our students with learning and other disabilities?
Oh, how long do we have? So great. Yeah, it's a great question. I did try to give some reply. I think it's fundamentally the same, but there may be some limitations in depending on the severity of the intellectual disability. If that makes sense. If I sound like I'm dancing around trying to avoid getting myself in hot water, I think it's one of the way I was trying to answer that question was, do we see the same developmental progression? I think generally, yes. It's just kind of the range of SEL skills. Now, when it comes to adolescence, that I have a harder time answering that question because I don't quite know what to say. It's such a new area, like with the Salience Network, which to me is the fundamental, that's quintessential adolescence. I don't know yet. I haven't seen enough research yet to know how does it develop for individuals with intellectual disabilities. I don't know. I know that's a terrible answer. I don't know, but that's about as far as I could get.
Okay, thank you. Another question that keeps kind of coming up is there's a great deal of angst, if you will, by teachers and all educators of returning back to school face to face. How do they contact or get administration and possibly school boards to understand that they are really struggling with that? Any thoughts from the panelists?
I'm going to jump in real quickly here just because I was a former principal. You know what? You need to advocate for yourself. You're all, as Barnett Berry says in his book, you're all teacherpreneurs. You're all people who want to lead but don't want to leave. And the biggest fear we have is making somebody angry with us because we are demanding something. Well, you're not demanding. What you are is expecting a safe, secure, caring environment in which you can provide the very best, as Tina mentioned early on, the very best that you can do. You've got to find someone who will listen. And believe me, we former principals and even ones that are out there are not ogres most of the time. And we really do care about the wellness of our staff because we are only as good as those people who work in with the kids and the parents each and every day. Speak up, speak out, be a group together in support of what is right to be successful in your classroom.
I think part of what I'm hearing from that question is that this person is an administrator who's feeling some anxiety themselves on how to support their staff. And I think the number one piece there is communicating with your staff. I have always supported multiple buildings as a social worker. And for me, I see differences in how my leaders communicate. I'm supervised by a district level person, and then I have multiple principals. And so I know that I personally feel less anxious as a staff member in a building when I have frequent, candid communication from the leader. And that goes the same for my district level supervisor. When it's open communication of, you guys, I'm in the same spot you are. I'm so sorry. I'm doing what I can to convey your concerns. I'm doing what I can to advocate for what you guys are saying as a consensus is the best interest for us as a staff. That goes so much farther for me than an email going, hey, we still don't know anything. That validation piece, that co-regulation piece that Tina has spoken about, like that's huge as an leader to be able to do that for your staff.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to chime in, and Tracy, and just really second what she said, and to maybe put another word to it is just full transparency. Staff just want to make sure that they know what you know, and that's going to change. So it's going to feel like over communication because you're going to be communicating a lot, because there's going to be a lot of changes, I think, between now and middle of August. So full transparency and co-regulation, that's how I would sum that up.
Okay, thank you. I think that kind of jumping subjects, I think that a number of educators have difficulty distinguishing between mental health issues and social emotional learning skills. And how might we help teachers to connect and then differentiate between the two?
I'll jump in real quick here. Start by saying they are different. I think socio-emotional skills support healthy, positive mental health and wellness. I see those as an outcome in and of the SEL skills as learning as an outcome. When we get to was it not just wellness, but it was the problems that go along with mental health. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I would say there's, whether we can associate, lack of socio-emotional learning with poor mental health, I don't know. I'm not quite comfortable saying yes. Certainly there's some relationship there. But I tend to see them as different because mental health can cover a whole, if we're talking depression that has physiological, strong physiological genetic component to it, one can exacerbate the other. So yeah, I'm doing a lot of hesitating. Sorry, I'm trying to be.
No, that's fine. I think one of the concerns is that with concerns or issues with mental health, we really want professionals to work on those issues. While social emotional issues, there's, teachers are typically given a curriculum to kind of follow through and work through some of those issues. So how do we kind of help to distinguish between the two?
I would maybe just add to that, it takes a good assessment. And, Jose talked about all these support systems that we may need to fully comprehend that. I mean, it's really taking a good assessment at neurocognitive skills are really the skills that we need to be focusing on, because those are the skills in the educational setting we got to make sure that are in place so kids can learn, right? So it goes back to me is just doing a good assessment on neurocognitive skills. And as a teacher, they're probably not going to be able to have the skills or to know how to do that. It very well may take some support staff, like Jose was talking about, to assist with that if there's an area of concern.
Well, the other piece I would add to that, Tina, is it mental health or is it mental illness? Or is it social emotional or is it behavioral that we're talking about? And so oftentimes we'll ask, what is the function of the behavior? What is the behavior communicating to me? And if it's defiance, well, it could be a mental illness issue, but it could be because there's other things in the child's hierarchy of needs that aren't being met. And so we really have to peel back the layers and figure out what is really going on with this student. And you're right, Tina, it may require the social worker to come in and do an observation, or a counselor, or another set of eyes on that student to see. And then the other piece is the frequency. Is it happening regularly, or is it only happening right before reading and writing? There's lots of variables that we need to think about, but we had this conversation all the time in my office: mental illness versus mental health. What is the difference? And there is a big difference. Mental health, I think, is more the umbrella, and then mental illness is within that spectrum of overall mental wellness, health.
Okay, thank you. Let me see. I just want to remind everyone that there are a lot of new materials that have just been posted on our conference materials page. And I did include that link again in the chat. There are some materials that were posted yesterday and today. So I think a number of the questions wanting to access that would be very helpful. I want to again, thank our panelists for sharing so much valuable information and the materials, the ideas, suggestions that you've given us. I just want to remind everyone to, please complete the evaluation survey. Your feedback is really valuable to us. And I think I'm going to kind of winding some things down. I think I'm going to hand it off to Joe, see if you have any last minute additions.
Again, I want to voice my thanks to our panel today. I think this dovetailed beautifully on the presentation on strategies for blended and virtual learning this past Tuesday, and we'll connect very well to the final one next week on the 7th, I believe it is, which is talking about new strategies toward education. Now that we are in this challenge of uncertainty, Americans and strong people and educators always rise to the top of the heap and develop new and exciting strategies. So please, if you haven't already signed up, make sure that you get involved in the last session, because I think you're going to learn some very exciting things that may already support what you're thinking about doing. So again, thank you to our panel and to all of those who have been involved in putting this virtual conference together. I'm just going to leave you with these words. Please take care of yourself. You can't take care of others until you take care of yourself. And there are lots of strategies that are out there and free. David talked about classical guitar. Some people pray, some people play the piano, some people sing. If you have not seen that video of the music teacher who wrote a song and she was playing the ukulele and she just said, "Here are the words," and she screamed. And it just brought a smile to everybody's face because it shows the human side of how we have to take care of ourselves. So again, thank you for everything. I think this closes out our day 2 session, and wow, again, thanks to everybody.